The first 3 weeks of the eruption here in Hawaii, crazy things would happen in the middle of the night. A new fissure would open up and it would threaten a new neighborhood. Thousands of people were evacuated from their homes. I started the Hawaii Tracker Facebook group to help people understand what's going on and get their questions answered.
Hey, how's it going? We're live. This is Fissure 20.
We had hundreds of people all throughout the neighborhoods sending in videos, articles, and images. We spend a lot of time making sure the accurate information gets out.
This is live. Still lava moving.
They weren't just sharing a story, they were helping their neighbor. If a family was being evacuated, my group would just jump in and help out. It was huge. They were watching out for each other.
Hello everybody, thank you for coming. Thank you for the support from everybody.
As we go through this, we're growing closer together as a community. When tragedies like this strike, you really realize how much you need each other.
We are the Hawaiian Volcano Education and Resilience Institute, HVERI for short. A lot of people know us from the 2018 eruption of Kīlauea in the Lower East Rift Zone. Working under Hawaii Tracker on the Facebook group. Since then, we've been trying to carry on and take the lessons, the hard lessons that were learned during that eruption and try and prepare for the next major disaster that comes to our island.
Yeah, so we do that through two different programs. One is volcano education, and the other part is digital resilience, which we address through online groups on social media. So the way the two programs work together is that the social media networks end up being a distribution pathway for all the information. And having that network in place means we can provide more than just volcano education, but any other preparedness information as well.
What we were working for really came about in the Mauna Loa eruption in 2022. Within hours of that eruption starting, we had the mayor, Mitch Roth, we had USGS HVO Ken Hahn on the stream trying to help flush out a little bit of the ongoing because it's so new. It's completely different from our previous major eruption, which was 2018.
One of the things that Talmadge and I were talking about was how do we deal with social media? It was something we needed to figure out and get right. Our job is to get information to the public and make sure that the public get it as well as possible and as correctly as possible. When Philip and Dane started coming to and live streaming the meetings, it was great because we were reaching more people than we normally would. So when the eruption actually happened, we had this relationship. The interviews we did during the eruption, the most fun ones were the ones with Philip and Dave because they were more relaxed and we knew we were getting to the local community and people were asking questions. So those were the best, I think. I just want to really give a shout out to those guys and how we worked as a team on this eruption. It really worked out well and we got to a lot of people we wouldn't have normally gotten.
Aloha everyone, and welcome to this week's Hawaiian Volcano Update. Today is Thursday, May 15th, 2025. Kīlauea is in between its episodes number 21 and 22 right now. So we just had 21 last weekend, and we'll talk about that and talk about what's coming up in preparation for the next one, which the USGS expects in the next 2 or 3 days, perhaps this weekend. How are you doing, Dane? How's your last week been?
Doing good, yeah. Just a little surprise thrown off by the Sunday eruption on Mother's Day. Caught me a little off guard, but we were there to get our stuff out and watch the episode as it progressed.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, we'll talk about how there was a little bit of a shorter cycle before the episode 20, and then I kept up, and so now we're a little bit off of our regular pattern, and we're getting our statistics back towards a little bit more towards the average there, but not quite. We got a long way to go still on that. I'm working off of Tuesdays to the weekends now. So, all right, we'll talk through our update here today. Dane will be collecting. Go ahead.
I was going to say, found a way to make it even busier up there. That's about the only way is to take it from Tuesday and make it on the weekend somehow. And boom,
right,
it's more busy.
Right.
All right. Sorry.
Yeah, so Dane will be collecting questions for us to discuss partway through and leading discussion on chat. Mahalo for that, as always, Dane, and Lou as well on the back end. Mahalo to our ASL interpreters with us today, as always, Carrie and Dano. And with all those intros said, maybe we'll get into our volcano summary now, yeah?
Let's do it.
All right. So let's get things set up here. And all right. Aloha, everyone. This is our Hawaiian volcano summary for May 15, 2025. Kīlauea erupted its 21st episode on Mother's Day on this past Sunday, producing maximum fountain heights of about 650 feet or 200 meters, and a long lava flow that went along the northern caldera wall. That's what you see in this opening photograph right here. In the later stages of the fountain, which is still occurring in the southwest part of the caldera, and pouring lava across the caldera floor, not posing any threat to people. And if we look at some of the time-lapse views, this is the B1 camera showing the vent in the top left part of the screen, and that long flow in this view coming along the northern rim across the screen right there. And followed by a short ooze-up flow that comes in during the day the next day here. That same view from the S2 camera, we saw glow at both pits overnight, with some lava fountaining beginning at 4 o'clock in the morning before the main fountains began at 12:45 p.m., putting flows across the crater floor, almost all from the north vent, with only a few minutes of activity at the very end of the episode from the south vent. Right there. We have some clips from the V1 and V2 cameras showing how, as this fountain grew in height in the first couple of hours, it produced this fan-shaped, inclined feature that was dropping tons of tephra and creating dust clouds in the southwest corner of the caldera, as you can see here. So that's produced maximum fountain heights that are the second highest that we've seen thus far, matching episode 18, and up from the low that we saw in episodes 19, 20, and 17 previously. Still not reaching the peaks of 1,000 feet that we saw in episodes 15 and 16, but certainly back in its growing trend here. And if we look at the USGS table of episodes, we can see here a little bit more of that return to normal in that we had a shorter duration of precursory activity, all of it happening on Sunday, just a few hours before the main fountaining phase here, which overall lasted 8 hours, ending at 8:36 p.m. So there is our combined lava flows and fountain duration, and you can see that we are on a shorter end of average from what we've been seeing recently, but approaching more similar patterns to what we saw previous to this deviation, with these longer orange bars showing pre-fountain lava flow activity. And our current pause duration is marked here, and this blue bar may increase as the pause extends, but you can see that we are on average with our pauses as well, and perhaps a little bit shorter than normal. You see our last two were a little bit shorter, and here we are expected to be in the same ballpark for the next episode as well. As we said, this is all happening in the southwest part of the caldera, posing no threat to people. With the trade winds blowing, most of the material is falling to the southwest part of the crater and the caldera rim. So we can see that the pattern shown on ground monitors has resumed its inflation, similar to all the previous episodes, so that there is an episode 22 expected. And if we look at the USGS notice from today, in their analysis, they note that data indicate episode 22 is likely to occur between Saturday and Sunday, or in the next 2 to 3 days, with a small chance of it being delayed until Monday if the inflation rate slows enough. So we'll see if we're back onto the weekends, and the main threat still being the tephra and the gases. Over Friday and Saturday, the winds are expected to shift to be to the southeast. So you can see some of the fog forecasts starting to blow the plume towards inhabited areas. And so depending on the timing of the eruption, it may possibly pose some threat to nearby communities to the northwest, especially. Earthquake-wise, it's been pretty quiet on Kīlauea, with an irregular patterns of deep Pahala events and south flank events and a few events under the summit. But really overall, quite low numbers below the background or at the background levels, as the volcano remains in equilibrium as seen by this GPS measure north and south across the caldera. We've been oscillating around an equilibrium, and the last few episodes have oscillated less, maintaining an equilibrium a little bit more steady here. On the rift, things are still quiet with the rift zone contracting, and there's no sign of activity there in the near future. That's the update on Kīlauea. Mauna Loa is still very quiet. This is earthquakes for the entire last month underneath the summit. There's only 80 for the entire month. So when we look at that, plots down here, quite low, and these low values that are not typical of the recovery phase following a 2022 eruption of Mauna Loa. And just a slightly different take here. Here's our earthquakes over the last year, plotted by depth over the last year of time. And you can see that there is still quite a lot of activity within the volcano. It's just spread out in time and space. So it's not building pressure towards an imminent change. So it's still filling fairly quietly, but it is certainly moving and shaking down there. And that's our Hawaiian Volcano summary for this week. So we'll turn to our hazard summary now and look at a couple of cameras. First, this K2 camera from the tower over at Uekahuna. You can see the construction site here in the foreground. There's the restrooms. There's a little bit of a fountain peeking up. And so I've cut out all the nighttime views to show you just the daytime views over the last week or so. And so here's our vent within the caldera down in there. And you'll see that when the winds blow towards the southwest in the trade wind dominant pattern, then you see the gas all blowing away from people pretty much the entire week there. So it was a good week for air quality, even though we have all this activity and eruption and blasts of gas coming during that interval. That's the K2 camera. Let's look also at the S2 camera. This is the one looking at the vent directly. I cut out the nighttime hours once again, so you can just see the wind blowing the stuff over towards the southwest. So there is our fountain, gas, everything is still blowing off that direction. And that's what we would worry about with the wind direction changing potentially this weekend. Some of that stuff blowing towards the highway or towards Volcano Village or the golf course subdivision. So here's the VOG Measurement and Prediction Project homepage, VMAP, from University of Hawaii at Manoa. And if you go to their VOG forecast dashboard, here is our source, which in our intervals is at 1,500 tons per day. That's what we're seeing right now. And when the next episode begins as high fountaining phase is when we expect the big blast of gas to come out. That's when we're seeing tens of thousands of tons per day. And so that would intensify the color of this and distribution of this forecast, but the direction of where it goes is more or less the same. So you can kind of see even these light gray background colors, giving you some idea of which way the wind is blowing overall across the island here. So So SO2, you can see that little flare where it flashes towards the saddle with that southeast direction. And that's the hazard there. This forecast is only going out 48 hours. And so that's where it loops back around, is after it does this little flip over here. Looking at SO4 particulates, the ones that last a little longer in the air, you can see there is effect. Let me zoom it in a little more here. There is effect here on a Kona side, as well as into the saddle area as well. So with bigger concentrations, bigger tonnage coming out, you expect this to be a larger effect across the island, especially with southeast winds, potentially to the other islands as well. However, right now, while it hasn't happened, we can check in and see what's normal. Normal is everything in the greens, even though some values are a little bit elevated within the greens. You can still see that we're in a clear, according to the Department of Health website from the state. Coming to Purple Air, the Citizen Science Monitoring Network, where people can connect their own weather stations to this web service. You can see a larger array of points here, including some bordering on the yellow there, perhaps because of that changing wind or the concentration of the wind blowing that plume off in that direction there. But overall, air quality is pretty good across the island now. It's been several days, and there should be only a few remnants of the fog left, if anything at all. And there's always other factors around, right, that could be causing particulate air quality, pollution, things like fires or dust could also affect that kind of thing. So we're using the volcano for the most part, but there can be other sources as well, which is why it's good to look once in a while at what else might be popping up here. Closer in to the national park, everything is in the green on the national park air quality monitors. And looking at the charts here for the last 48 hours, they've remained in the green that entire time, right there. As we saw, those strong trades lasting still till now. Right now, they're at north-northeast 7 miles an hour. Earlier today, they were at 10. And you can see that dispersal pattern to the south and to the west there. So a couple more things on the air quality. First is windy.com, the satellite view of this SO2 cloud that's further up in the atmosphere, not really down on the ground as much, right? But you can see how this is really every week giving another shot of SO2 into our atmosphere, and it's moving around with the global weather patterns here and joining this big mass of sulfur that's floating across the atmosphere here. And if we look at our MOUNTS project that sometimes captures this SO2 emission, let's come back to, here was our last episode, right? Was it right here? 5th, 6th, there is a little bit of it, and then blowing off to the southwest. So coming off from the source blowing, I didn't catch it as much there. And then the next frame, I'll keep missing it here. There, it's already off to the southwest there, with that big gap in between when those two images were taken. So coming forward to our most recent time shot, you can see here it says 5:11 just past midnight. This is not going to be Hawaii time, so this is going to be too early. And we come to the next one, and it's the 12th at almost midnight again. So you actually are having almost 48 hours in between there, and it looks like we actually missed this capture. There's no image of this in that time. So that means a puff of gas came out and flew off this map within that 48 hours pretty quickly, which is a little bit unusual, but that's what can happen sometimes when you have only infrequent, or not what this, when you have to sample your data based on when a satellite can fly over, kind of thing. So that wraps up our volcanic hazard summary, which is still the gas and the tephra here. That's our main hazard to people. And yeah, we'll transition now to our live earthquakes. So looking at our earthquakes, here is the map from the USGS for the last week of earthquakes. These are plotted by depth, with the reds being shallower and the blues and greens being deeper. And what we see over the last week is not a huge concentration of earthquakes, but there are some around. You can see there's these settling events offshore In Kona, there's some under Mauna Kea and offshore of Waipio as well. Even offshore Puna, this deep one, 3.6, 26 miles down right over here. But closer in, you can see that we have a few events on the flank of Mauna Loa. Mauna Loa, we imagine, is still adjusting to Kilauea's back and forth, and now equilibrium, parking itself there. So interesting to think about how that might affect these dynamics. So there's a shallower one as well, probably part of that same provenance of forces trying to adjust back and forth there, trying to adjust these shallower ones. And then the blue ones being deeper, this is likely something more of the path from Pahala towards the volcano. And you can see it's actually very, very quiet. We're normally used to seeing way more earthquakes in this blue zone in Deep Pahala than we're seeing here. So you gotta wonder if there's been some effect here of what Kilauea is doing on this Pahala frequency of earthquakes. I'll come back to that here in a little while.
Might hop in right here with, we got a
Yeah, go
question
ahead.
about those ones right there that
Okay.
your mouse is on. So I'll throw it in right here. We know earthquakes can happen at any time. With the earthquake Pahoa earlier this morning and the two in the East Rift Zone and Mauna Ulu respectively, do you think the action may be changing in a new direction or just settling?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think what we're seeing is nothing really big yet. So if we can zoom in here, it is interesting to note these earthquakes, if they are all well located, are right adjacent to this segment of the rift zone where we recently had the eruption at Nepal. It was right, Nepal crater is this one right here. So right in there would have been the eruption site, something like that. And we had this dikes inject over here and over here as well. So this has been the area where the magma has reached. When we had this recent eruption, we actually saw a signal at Pu'o'o, so we think that there was widening of the ground, perhaps as far as here, something like that. But the lava only staying in this area in here. So this is certainly the suspect area. If lava is coming back into here, could it be pushing it? But on the other hand, even without anything coming into here currently, this is the most recently changed area, and it could just be an adjustment of that still. In any case, it's not on a rift zone itself. It's off to the side within a south flank. And it's usually moving oceanward that way, right? So yeah, I'm not sure exactly what's happening right in there to associate with these earthquakes. But if we look at the GPS, which I haven't got to yet, but the GPS, let's see if I can, let's go to here. Let's go to the 2-year GPS stations that we have. So there is one on the Middle East Rift here, and you can see that Pu'o'o is actually decreasing in elevation while the land it's on is moving to the south there, right? So that seems to be part of the dynamic going on here as well. So it doesn't look like there's anything really super active happening in here now that we can see from any of the signals. The tilt meter is trending downwards within the rift zone, so it doesn't seem like there's anything new arriving in there. What's happened in there within the last year certainly could be adjusting. There could be the remnants adjusting as well as things settle and the rift zone contracts. But overall, I think the earthquake patterns are actually fairly low, right? Even here in this south flank area. If we come to our other map, it shows a few more of these. So let's come to this other USGS map. And this is interesting to look at for the last 7 days here. Let's look at coming down in magnitude. So our largest one was 3.6. This is that deep one offshore of Kapoho. I'm saying of Leilani here because people know where Leilani is now, perhaps more than Kapoho. So interesting, deep down. 3.3 here offshore, 4 miles down offshore of Kailua Kona. So likely a flank adjustment there as well. When you don't, seeing them once in a while is not that alarming because the island is always adjusting all the time. It's more when you start getting clusters of them, you start worrying about something larger potentially happening or something that might have further consequences than just having a little bit of shaking. But this is not one of those. It's still too small and just infrequent enough there. So coming to the next one, 2.9 here on the east flank of Mauna Loa, 3 miles down. So this is one of these adjustments between Mauna Loa and Kīlauea. 2.8, that's one of these south flank events. So there they are showing up. And it does seem like there's a little cluster of things happening down here as far as these this last week, slightly bigger earthquakes. 2.8 isn't that big, but within the last week, that's the third largest. And what happened to my list here? Did it reset on me? I zoomed in is what happened. Okay. There we go. Yeah, third largest there. So fourth largest. Then 2.8 here, 9 miles down, south of Waimea on the west side of Mauna Kea. We got some reports from our network of people feeling this, at least over in Honoka area. So these parts of the island over here that are a little bit more solid, they actually shake a little bit better because they are more solid. So earthquakes can actually be felt more widespread in some areas, depending on the kind of ground you're on there, even at that smaller size. Then back to south of Fern Forest, 2.6, 2.5, 2 miles down between Pahala and Kīlauea here. So these are still not the deep Pahala earthquakes. We get to a deep one underneath the summit of Kīlauea there. 2.2 on the south flank again. Another adjustment offshore of Kona. And finally, like the 10th largest earthquake this week is finally a deep Pahala earthquake at 2.1. And then you have another one here at number 12 as well, with another south flank event in between there. So and everything is getting lower than 2 there, right? So what I'm just pointing out is how much of a slowdown is actually happening with the earthquakes here in the deep Pahala zone. I had to go back and look at the paper there's a paper from Gonderman that talks about pore pressure change. And there was a time when we always talk about what's the relationship between Kīlauea and Mauna Loa, and there's various different ways in which they affect each other. One of the ways that's been modeled is the actual pore pressure. So the pore pressure, if you're relieving pressure at Kīlauea, that drop in pore pressure can propagate down the conduit all the way to the hotspot and all the way up Mauna Loa's feeder and then to Mauna Loa to cause a change in Mauna Loa's behavior as well. And the model that they made, Gonderman made, this is back in 2012, had a time frame of about 6 months for this to occur between some change happening at Kīlauea, say, and being felt then at Mauna Loa. 6 months. So maybe you would guess that halfway there would be the hotspot of Pahala. If it's going down and back up the other side, something like that, right? So maybe 3 months-ish, ballpark. You'd expect a pore pressure, pore pressure, as in like the pores of your skin. That's what they call it, I guess, like the little pores, little gaps in between the crystals in that mush of magma melt, I suppose. So that takes maybe 3 months, and maybe that pressure is relieving some earthquakes in Pahala. I have no idea. It's just interesting to think about things like that, since we know about that research from those scientists, and we're seeing some changes that we were used to Pahala being much more active than we're seeing here today. So that'll be our little earthquake discussion for today, and we'll move on to our monitoring signals here before taking our break. So let's start off with just looking at some of these text updates. And we'll start with Sunday's daily update that came out at 9:25 a.m. They noted at this point in time that what had happened was fountain events were observed in that morning, Sunday morning, starting at 4:20, and then repeating and getting much more frequent after 8 a.m. There were gas piston events, and though it's not stated here, if you look at the cameras, you can see that around 9:10 in the morning or so is when the first lava flows spill out of the crater, or out of the vents into the crater. So they note that the gas pistoning events begin on Sunday morning. They say fountains are likely to start in the next 24 hours. And they put out an update at 1:28 p.m. that says that those sustained lava fountains began at 12:45 p.m. They grew quickly to over 500 feet high, 150 meters, all from the north vent. And then we'll fast forward to the next update. That was at the end of this, when they just before 9 p.m., announced the 8:34 p.m. End of sustained fountaining after about 8 hours. So that was just that announcement of the end of it. And then we can come to today's daily update, which is similar to many of the others earlier in the week. And they note here the exact details of the time and duration. But they do say that episode 22 is likely to begin in the next 2 to 3 days. They note that there was glow from the vents, which as has been common much of the week, although glow from the lava flows themselves is greatly diminished. They note here in the observations the details of episode 21. They note how they grew within the first hour from 30 feet to over 500 feet. And then from 2 p.m. to 4 p.m., they were cycling between 200 and 500 feet over about 10-minute intervals, which is interesting to note there, with maximum fountain heights over 650 feet or 200 meters. After 4 p.m., fountains were more consistent and averaged around 400 feet. And until they ended at 8:34. Just prior to this, the south vent had minor fountain of less than 50 feet or 15 meters. And so 2 minutes after the north vent ends and the south vent was sort of just before that, the south vent also ends. This is just to show us, in case anyone was wondering if the south vent maybe was dead or blocked or what have you. It's just putting out a very, very blast burst at the very end, just to show us that it's still there and still clear to erupt if it needs to. So lava flows covered 50% of the crater floor. And intermittent spatter from the north vent began yesterday evening. So there already is signs of a lava shallow in a conduit again. And so since we've recovered about 5.5 of the 8 microradians we lost during episode 21, that's where there are forecasts of 2 to 3 days, or between Saturday and Sunday, or perhaps the latest until Monday comes from. So that is the text updates we have here. And as we showed before, here are the details in the USGS table. And as I said there, you can see a little bit of this change visible just in how they're denoting the start of episodes here, that we're back to a little bit of a different pattern just from how they're laying it out there. Okay, so we showed this as well, but just to come back to it there, right? And here's our pattern. Overall, we were seeing this increase until episode 17 was the funny one that had those lowest fountains thus far. And since then, we popped back up to this high one, and that's the one we matched recently here, but we've had a couple of in between, so it's kind of wonder what exactly is going on here. And of course, there are variations, and I've mentioned before that one big variable to me is how much lava is injecting underneath the crusted lava lake. That's a huge mass of lava and how that interacts. And so depending on that connection, you could have a different amount of buffering and different effects on this process of the lava creating fountains come out of that vent. So I think this is interesting to check out here. And so we'll have to see what this pattern comes to be, but for now, looks like it's still on this higher increasing trend. If it were to start going down and remaining low down, you might start to believe that the pattern was coming to a close, right? But there's no indication of that yet, at least to my eye. So we'll see how long we can keep it going here. So looking at the details, when we look at that USGS table, the USGS table is what I'm trying to show here in a different way through these graphs, right? The red being the duration of the higher fountaining, and the orange being how long it takes since the first flows start spilling out of the crater before, right? So when we talk about that intermittent duration, that's these big orange lead ups to the eruption that we're having here. So you can see that we are definitely having shorter durations these last 4. And what could that mean here? it's hard to really say. But I thought one thing that will be interesting to give us a little bit of insight, and we don't have this information here for Kīlauea, but we can come back to reference the Pu'o'o eruption. And this is Scientific Investigations Report 2018 5109. There's a number right there. So this is where this comes from. I was going to show you guys a couple of pages. So what we have here is two plots that are showing time, right? So basically what you're looking at is episodes 1, 2, 3, 4, from left to right there. And this basically goes till episode 47. And on the y-axis here, on this left-hand plot, this is the volume, and DRE stands for dense rock equivalent, right? So you're imagining your lava without any bubbles in it, squish it all down without the gas in it, and then how much lava do you actually have? Because the gas can make it really frothy, right? So dense rock equivalents. And what this is showing here is, with a couple of outliers, most of this data falls within a pretty narrow range right here, right? 5 to 10 million cubic meters, which is interesting because we've been seeing from the recent eruption happening now, we're in this range of maybe, we've seen 2.5 to 5, around in that ballpark. So we're in a very similar range of absolutes of volume being put out for each eruption. Although this being dense rock equivalent, ours might be a little bit lower because that's likely including some of the gas in there. So all this is to say that, like, it didn't matter at what point, how long it took for the episode to come, it was putting out about the same amount of lava every single time. But couple this with this plot on the right, which is the average discharge rate in cubic meters per second. So how fast is coming out, right? So what you can see is that there's clearly an increase happening here, so that the later episodes are putting out more lava in cubic meters per second, right? But in total, they're putting out the same amount, which means that overall, the duration of the episodes is getting shorter and shorter and shorter over time with Pu'o'o. That's what this is basically showing us here. So there's another way that this is shown here on another one of these pages. So here is general observations. It looks like it's page 7 here. And for example, here, they have broken down the first 16 episodes and then the next 26 over here, right? So for example, the pause was 23 days for the first 16, and it on average was 26.5 days for the last 27. So the pauses were getting longer with time at Pu'o'o on average, right? On average. If you look at how long was a fountaining, the first 16 episodes averaged 46 hours. The last 26, it averaged much less than that, 12, almost 13 hours. And so there you see, really, it was had to put out more lava per second to get to the same amount total in less time. When it reaches that certain amount, that's when it shut off, regardless of how long it took. So that's really fascinating to see, right? And why might that change? Maybe you're imagining like how the fountains and the actual conduit is evolving over time. It's getting more efficient. It's getting lava out easier the longer it's going, basically, right? So that could be something that's happening here as well. That could explain some shortened durations of fountains that we're seeing here. But we'll see.
Just to follow up on that, because I hear it all the time about it's charging up for a long time this time. It's going to be a big one. There's nothing there in terms of these.
I don't know. If you'd go on based on this, there seems to be some other physical mechanism with a threshold that's just independent of how long it takes. Right. Because it's the rate that it's coming in and how much it's building up, and so that's where I think, if it's having to fill not the same space, but let's say you add an extra room there because you have more of a lava lake available, let's say, and now it's going to take longer because you have a larger area to fill, and that can make it take longer, right? As far as when it's trying to squeeze, like whatever mechanism is actually causing a nucleation of gas bubbles and causing that to then fountain out, that process, when it hits that threshold, it just shuts itself off. That seems to be somewhat tied to the amount of lava, at least it seems to be at Pu'o'o, right? And it's fascinating because Pu'o'o actually had a much longer cycle. We're talking about once a month here, basically, right? We're looking about this.
Right.
This thing might have lasted between half a day and 2 days, more or less, right? And doing that every 25 days on average. So about once a month or so, right? And in that case, if maybe that's how long it took it to recharge, because that's how much was coming out each episode. It was always about the same. And for us, we're right directly underneath the pipe at the summit. Maybe we're more efficient and we can accumulate 5 million cubic meters faster because it's just straight right there. It doesn't have to go anywhere through some meandering pathway 9 miles away. That's just something to think about as well.
So another thing, just a different way of looking at it, would it be fair to say that there's 5 million cubic meters of lava coming into the system weekly, roughly, but ballparkish?
Yeah, if we look at the GPS and see like the overall equilibrium, like the crater is not extending, then in a big picture, what's coming in is what's going out. I think you have to average that between episodes. If you look at the tilt plots, they don't always, like, some of them drop more than others, some of them come back up more than others. But on average, in total, well, yes.
It gives us a proxy for
variations.
The input from the volcano, essentially, because of how it's in equilibrium right now. It's in a weird state. It kind of lets us see. I don't know. It's just interesting.
These times of equilibrium are the points in the data that scientists look for to make these kinds of calculations, because that's when you can do it. Because if you have a disequilibrium, then it gets more complicated.
Be anything, right? It's not a closed system, or it's not a confined lab, right? It's so many variables up there.
So we're approximately confined now, let's call it, right? You know, like there's still stuff moving, but, you know, compared to how much it moves, it's not moving as much as it normally does.
Right, exactly.
So yeah, and interesting that even with these shorter durations in the later episodes, higher rates, and they actually had not everything pouring into one big bowl, but they were pouring down a slope towards Royal Gardens, right? And so they would have areas of the flows as well. And those first 16 episodes were covering 2.8 square kilometers, and then the last 26, 3.7. So a good amount of more area, right? So you can see that when it comes out faster, it can actually run farther and cover more area because it's doing it in less time. That's another consequence of this as well, right? So when we keep seeing lava flows running across a crater floor, that's really fascinating, because, like, you know, how is that changing over time might give us an estimate of what the output is, because we don't have these numbers from the USGS yet for our episodes of 2025 to know, like, what, you know, what was the actual volume for every episode and the rate of eruption for every episode in particular. So yeah, these things, average rates right here, right? So you can see average rate from 4 to 20 was 51, and then over 3 times that for the last ones there, right? So really fascinating, right? And you can see some of the interesting shapes of fountains here. Like this is an interesting one here, big jet, and look at all this dust, black tephra in the sky, but back here, all this gray stuff on the ground is where the stuff is falling and hitting the cone and generating this big dust cloud. And if we look here, this is interesting fan-shaped fountain, something we saw in episode 21 as well. That's why another reason I like this page. We'll see this fan-shaped fountain. In this case, looks like it's inclined away from the camera. Massive tephra cloud over there as well. We can see this here in our own videos after the break, or like what we shared on our opening, a little clip of that. So that's just a little bit of a slight detour we can come back to it there, right? Of, you know, what's going on here. Patterns to keep our eyes on. I don't think anything is quite set yet, but that's the kind of thing you can start digging into when you have data for every single episode with the volumes and all that. And so we will await more releases and see what we get and dive into as much as we can as we get that information. So to finish off some more of our graphs here, here is our last week. Inflation leading up to episode 21, the deflation during, and then since then the recovery coming. You can see we've still got a ways to go to reach, if this is the threshold, we still have a ways to go to reach that. And that's why they say 2 to 3 days of this rate gets us to there by their estimates, right? So they're making an assumption of the rate as well, and that's why there's some variability and it's a window rather than an actual specific time and place. So earthquakes have actually been low. Our background on a volcano is usually around 30 per day. So you can see this whole last week we're below that. Certainly they're still happening, but we're used to seeing more for sure. And you do see the red line showing that there are these bigger events popping in from time to time as well. Some of which are really on a flank and not underneath the summit as well. So depth versus time, we're used to seeing usually a lot more blue in this band over here. So it's looking a little scarce, and actually honestly appears a little bit scarce too, but a little bit more populated than the blue one too. We'll go back to the last month and we'll see more of that pattern a little bit more easily here, but here's a map for the last week. Really a lot of space on here. We'll come back to that here in a few minutes. So looking at the last month now. First, this plot of tilt in blue of the summit and green of the rift zone at Pu'o'o. So here's the Pu'o'o tilt going down, no effect. This is why when we had that earlier question, it seems like there's really no magma going in there. Presently, there's no sign of that in a shallow part of the rift zone by Pu'o'o. But the summit here, you can see there's our episode 21 drop and the recovery since then. And you can see maybe why this could be a valuable threshold to consider. Pretty similar for 19, 20, and 21, all of them. And we can see that there were some wiggles and variations in both of these recharge eras as well. So we're seeing some of that here as well, but you'd expect that when we reach this point, we'll be ready to have our next episode. And this is not that far off the one we saw for, what were we at here, 21, 20, 19, 18. But 18 was the one that lasted longer and had that longer recovery as well. And so since then, we've had this shorter cycle where now we're in this third little one, it looks like, as opposed to having this bigger one we saw before earlier this month. All right, so halfway of the last month is somewhere in here. So the first half of the month, we had one. In the second half, we've had three. There is that shorter cycle I'm talking about that we're seeing now. Same pattern we see at the Sand Hill Station. We'll keep it going past there. And our earthquakes per day, with our background being around 30, you can see really within the last 2 weeks here of the month has been extraordinarily low, in fact. So there is the depth versus time plot. So in the orange band, you can see it's a little steadier over the last month, maybe getting a little bit lighter, but hard to really eyeball that, maybe a little bit here. If you look at the blue zone, though, it's a little easier to tell how there are less events here in this segment, and maybe that's part of what's going on. And if the blue ones are some kind of proxy of magma pressure from a hotspot coming to the volcano, then that could have knock-on effects with less earthquakes towards the surface as well. So really fascinating to think about. I don't think we'll have any answers soon. This kind of stuff takes a long time for them to research and publish and put out there. So we'll just speculate for now and let you guys think about the cool ways that the Earth might work and how this might go together. And maybe you'll be the one to collect data and publish this someday. So the last 3 months of tilt. Here's our last 3 short cycles. There is that longer one before it, and the long one before that, the funky episode, 17 before that. And you see before that, we were in a similar pattern of having them a little more frequently too. So maybe we're back to that, maybe we're not, but you can see how there's been variability here. And it seems like we're more similar to before episode 17 than we are to right afterwards. Overall, the peaks of these blue lines are, maybe coming down a little bit, but if you look at this 5 microradian dashed line, like just slightly above, right at it, slightly below, slightly above, slightly below. This was the funny one. 17 that had the little fountains, and so that's gets a pass, I suppose. But all the other ones are still kind of around there. It's kind of steady, maybe going down slightly, but not very fast if so. So it seems like it is in that somewhat equilibrium there, based on a tilt as well. So yeah, equilibrium based on the tilt as well there. So here's our earthquakes per week, still quite low since the December eruption began, and now it's led its 21st episode. And very different within the last year pattern since eruption began, with now we're in this equilibrium zone. And before that, we were in this rapidly extending the caldera zone, like stretching it, erupting to relieve it, stretching it, erupting to relieve it, or having an intrusion, and that kind of pattern, right? So now we're actually somewhat mirroring that, but within each episode, just pressurizing and then coming back around this center line somewhere in here. And the last three, even tighter since they're smaller, closer cycles. So Pu'u'o, you can see, is not really, it has some noise in the data here, but it is still generally this downward trend. So rift zone getting closer together and not really spreading apart there. So, and if we look at the 2-year GPS, once again, we showed us on Pu'u'o, it's dropping down, it's moving to the south, and it's kind of stable on the east-west. I mean, maybe it's moving slightly west, but before it was moving a little more east, so it's kind of rocking there. So that's not showing any sign of activity that's different. So here is when we had the intrusion into Nepal in the Middle East Rift last year. That's kind of signal you'd be looking for to see some kind of change at Pu'u'o, and now we're not seeing that presently. So if and when, I would say it's a matter of time, even if it's years rather than months, we'll see a signal like this at Pu'u'o again. That's the kind of thing we're looking for, is this big deviation off of the pattern that we're seeing as a background southward movement and downward movement as well. The other stations on here are all around the summit. And so similarly, the top panel is east-west, the bottom one is north-south, and the middle one, I'm sorry, is north-south, and the bottom one is up and down. So you can see still a slight decrease in elevation and all the summit stations, getting close to equilibrium here on the eastern side, but still a slight decrease there. And most of these are on the south. These are all on the south side of the caldera, so they're all showing a little bit of southward motion as well. There, and this one is looking pretty flat here at Ahua. At the top of the south flank, see it normally moves a lot more to the south, and recently, since this eruption began, it's not doing that, and so that's showing that it's another sign of that equilibrium. Just saw how small that looks on the screen there, so let's blow that out there. You can see how it looks much flatter here since this eruption and compared to before. Right, these are 2-year plots, so this is year 1 and year 2, and then here we're in the last 5 months of the second year. So to wrap up our signals here, earthquake counts per month over the last 5 years on Kīlauea are still at around 1,000 or so. So that's still lower than we've had over 5,000 here, and then build up to the rift zone activity. And GPS, here's our relative equilibrium compared to we showed you the last year of extension, but that continues past the last year to all the way to 5 years ago with these same kind of drops for eruptions. The very first eruption at the summit, December 2020, the September 2021, and so on and so forth. So in Pu'u'o, there was that long-term contraction that we've had since the 2020 eruption began at the summit, that very first one following 2018, with the only change being that Middle East Rift intrusion and eruption sequence last year. And since then, we're resuming that contraction pattern there too. So because there's so few earthquakes here this last week, you can actually look at the earthquakes per month. And you see a little bit more of the pattern here. Pahala earthquakes are still there, just slower than usual. South flank events are still there, just a little bit slower than usual. There's summit events too. There's nothing in the rift zone really, just background events all through here. Southwest rift zone, upper east rift connector, the southeast rift, all of it looks pretty quiet, right? And for comparison, for the last month, here's the last year. You don't see any gaps anywhere in here during the last year. Okay? So it's really a different pattern we're seeing here within the last few months than we saw previous to this eruption that we're now on episode 21. So those are all the charts to show you guys. One last thing is going to be the satellite view. So turning to the Mounts project, looking at the Sentinel-1 interferograms. They actually have releases now every 6 days. So let's show you guys. Here's the one that was just put out on May 10th for the previous 6 days. And you don't really see a whole lot in here as far as inflation of the ground. So there's basically 2 patterns to talk through here. Let me see if I can make this a little bigger so you can see it. When you have these solid colors, that's the whole ground moving coherently together, up or down. And you look at these bullseye patterns, we don't really see any. So overall, as a whole, the ground is not moving up or down very much at all. But what you also see is a speckled area, which is this where it lacks coherence. So these are areas where the ground has changed very chaotically. So on the crater floor, that's likely lava flows, and up on a rim, that's likely the tephra that's falling on a rim and changing the elevation in chaotic ways, because every little block has a different dimension. And looks nothing like the first scan of the satellite that 6 days prior to that. So you get that on the rim. You can see a little bit of the tephra fallout, a little bit more tailing to the south here, right? You can see these the incoherent flows, how far the flows are extending, the area of the crater floor that's moving. And you do see a little bit more uplift, maybe right in there, a little bit of this section. So not quite clear if this is something feeding the lake or some section of the lava floor that's not moving as readily, but it's more rising coherently together, like we saw on the camera sometimes, the whole floor rising up as a big mass. I'm not quite sure if it stays intact enough and doesn't break apart, maybe that can produce a kind of signal. I'm not quite sure. There's kind of one there and one up here too. And otherwise, lots of flows all over. And then otherwise, that speckle is forest where the trees are blowing around, and you get the same effect from the trees blowing in the wind when the satellite's trying to detect how tall the ground is. So really, that's interesting stuff in here. Otherwise, pretty quiet everywhere else. And the image from last week, from the 4th, going back to the previous 6 days from that, shows a similar pattern too. Right? You can see the forest everywhere. You see these fairly similar colors across the solid parts of the image. And you do see this kind of speckled zone where the flows are. You see that same little area of uplift back here in the south. You see this pattern of tephra up on the benches here. It does not extend quite so far to the south as the previous one that we just saw. It just shows you a little bit how the wind direction can change, and you can deposit stuff more in this direction or more in this direction down over here. And as a reminder of that, we had from this volcano watch from last month here, this image popped up in the middle of it, showing how they were mapping tephra deposits on the rim, and they basically could go all the way to the northwest or all the way to the southwest in this kind of triangle zone here from where the fountain blew out of the crater. So that's basically all the information we can pull out from the volcano this week. That's not visual, and so we'll leave our visual observations till after our break, and I'll pass that to Dana and Lou here.
All right, thank you, Phil. Let's go ahead and bring in Lou. How you doing, Lou?
Hey,
had a busy day, huh?
Yep, big day. All right, let's jump right into this tonight, and we'll talk about that as we go on.
Check your mic up real quick, just levels.
Mic check, 1, 2, EQ up. Good on my end. How you sounding?
A little better now.
Yeah? All right, there we go.
Yep.
All right. Here we are in the park. We know everything that's going on up there is construction. I bring it up every week because there's always something new that's happening every week. And if you're new to the program tonight, or your first time going to the park, the Kīlauea Visitor Center is closed. You have to go to the Kīlauea Welcome Center, and I'll get to that in a second. This is new that's starting up, the roundabout construction of a roundabout on Crater Rim Drive, just west of the park entrance, is underway starting Monday, May 19th for the next 6 weeks. Vehicles entering the park must use the gravel lane on the right and detour through the Kīlauea Visitor Center parking lot. Vehicles exiting the park will be routed through the park administration and housing areas. This roundabout is scheduled to be finished in September of 2025. Dane, I just have to say this. Over the last, year or so that we've been going through all these updates and the construction, has it been moving smoothly? Have we been, reaching right? Considering the weather, the eruption, I have to hand it to the park and the construction crew. They are moving right along. Yeah. And just everybody that's going in know that things are happening and go slow. The detours are a little bit longer, but it might be a new spot of the park you've never seen before. There is the new Welcome Center. It's now open at Kīlauea Military Camp. And you can just keep driving after you get through the construction zone and past the steaming bluffs. Keep driving, and you'll see it on your right-hand side there. And parking is, you'll follow the parking signs, and it's back behind the new HVO building. Plenty of parking there. Bring your own water. The water filling stations are not where they used to be, and water is limited, so I recommend bringing your own. You can purchase some up there if Volcano House is open. If they have some at the MWR at the Kīlauea Military Camp there, possibly, but just bring your own. There are all your viewing areas, and this might be a question for Phil. How long before we get to move up and overlook for viewing? Because the floor is coming up, right? We're going to get a new viewing area in a month or two. We had a tree go down last week. I left this here as a reminder that if you go up Mauna Loa Road, trees do come down in the wind. Pack things with you. Make sure your phone is charged or you have a charging cable. Bring your water, flashlight, blanket, non-perishable foods. You may be there for a while by the time you get a hold of somebody. Limited cell phone activity up through that area as well. So
I wonder what would be the requirements on, say you had a chainsaw. Are you allowed to cut the tree out of the road?
Nope, absolutely not. I don't even think it's recommended to pull it like us. We would just tow strap it up and pull it out of the way. I think your best bet is try to make a call or start hoofing it. Don't mess with anything in the park. If I see one chainsaw in a rental car, I'm not putting this back up anymore. We have an event down at the Kahuku unit. It is the Konani Challenge. Let the Pa'ani games begin. Konani is a Hawaiian game for kawa kahiko. Fun to play with or without experience. The Kahuku Konane Challenge is a chance to learn the history of the game and how to play it. Players will compete in elimination rounds until there is a winner. The winner will receive a Konani board from the Hawaii Pacific Parks Association. I just looked over and saw Dan was translating, so I got to pick up the pace a little bit. This is going on Sunday. Usually the Kahuku unit events are on Saturday. This is on Sunday, May 18th at 12 o'clock. It's a 60-minute event. Good luck. Life on the Edge is truly what is going on around here, waiting week to week for a new episode. Check out with one of the rangers at the Kīlauea Welcome Center for one of these events. And this weekend, we'd like to highlight, we have a collaboration with another local nonprofit, Haka, and we'll be doing that on Sunday. Thank you to all of you that came out last week when we had it, the first one. Those of you that took pictures with us, Dane is available this time around as well, so please stop by and get a picture. That's on May 18th at Maku's Farmers Market, 9 to 1 p.m. You got to pay the $2. Huh?
Tell them what Haka stands for.
Here we go. The Hawaiian Animal Kuleana Alliance. Thank you. Is it even on there? Good thing I have it mesmerized. All right, and here is our list of speakers. I have this up for us today. Looks like we have quite the lineup. Animal Control will be there. Dane, of course, will be there speaking. Cindy from Haka, there it is, Hawaii Animal Kuleana Alliance. Dennis from the University of Hawaii Sea Grant Program. If you live on this island anywhere, even if you live anywhere, and you can attend, come listen to Dennis, because if you think your home is prepared for a storm, he can break it down for you. We've live streamed a few of his speaking engagements, and it's really good to get that information. So if you're interested in making sure your home is prepared for any type of natural disaster, definitely check him out. Maku Marka, we have speaking, and we also have USGS there as well. Katie will be speaking. Come check us out. We got a lot going on. And Dane, want to give our special DJ announcement?
Yeah, so we'll have an MC there, and it will be DC from KWXX. You might recognize him, one of the most recognizable voices we have on the island. So I'm excited about that. Should be a fun event. Come by, check us out. About 9 to 1.
That's right. And as well, on the weekends, hit the Tsunami Museum, get educated on the tsunamis and how they have impacted just about everywhere in the world at some point. So get in there. They have new hours. They've been going on from 10 to 2 p.m. Saturday and Sunday. And this is what I attended today. We had the pleasure of being invited to a career day in Kau and teaching kids about AI and giving them a chance to experience things. This is one of the programs. It's our third program in our lineup from the volcano education, as well as our digital resilience and our youth development program. Thought I'd share that with you guys. There we go. And one more thing, help our community organization learn more about how you engage with volcano updates and social media, primarily with Kīlauea and Mauna Loa. Your input makes a difference. Take our survey. You can scan that QR code right now, or in a couple minutes, I will drop it in the chat and it will be in the description below. So please.
Yeah. That one really does help us out. Like if you want to contribute and go outside of just the normal donations, filling out the survey really helps us try and track and keep record data about what we do and its impact, and that helps us down the road. So it's very important. These little surveys that seem like nothing, they definitely help out.
Yep. You only have to do it one time. You're going to see us post it several times throughout the next coming weeks. You only need to do it once. It is greatly appreciated. And Dane, take us home.
Yeah, so I do want to take this time to shout out the Kīlauea Recovery and the 5i Grant Program through the County of Hawaii and Puma Strong as well. What they've done to help us with this program, as well as our other programs, to maintain and expand them, really does help a lot, and we appreciate all of their continued support there. All right. And we did have some donations come through. I wanted to shout those out real quick. We had Gregory H. with a $26.32 super chat or donation onto the website where we do take our donations over at hveri.org/donate. Also over there, we had a $50 donation from Marshall S., a $104 donation from Paula D. And we appreciate all the support there, as well as most recent a $5 super chat by James Olson and Mahalo HVERI. I appreciate all the support. All right.
One more thing. We are a 501c3 community-based organization, and we can't do this without your support. So thank you to everybody who donates. Here, your super chats, on our website there, on our donation platform, is greatly appreciated. We can't do this without you.
All right. Thank you, Lou, and we will tag Phil back in for the back half. Thank you.
You got it.
All right. Welcome back there, Phil. You are muted.
All right. Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah.
So maybe let's go through some of the visuals and do some questions towards the end after we see some more stuff here, huh?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Let's see if I can get the right thing on the stage. Here we go. So, all right. Here is a live view from the V1 camera into Kīlauea right now. And we see some degassing. We don't see any lava presently right now. But we'll check in with some of that spatter from last night. There's a view from the V2 camera. Pretty foggy from this direction. A little bit hazy there. So Let's first go through. There is a release from the USGS of a few photographs from episode 21. So here is one of those, the early hours. And that higher fountain overflows off of various sides of the vent. The main channel is here facing to the east, but this one little chute to the north as well. Lots of lava moving through those channels there. They note this image here on the left, and it looks like a hapu'u fern. I'm not sure if it's a hapu'u or if it looks like maybe it's an ama'u fern there that got partially buried by the tephra and is putting out new fronds through the hot stuff despite all the episodes being there. It's pretty fascinating. Over here we have a scientist that's looking through, looks like a laser rangefinder, probably measuring fountain heights. That's probably where they get this 500-foot measurement. They note that favorable winds allowed scientists to stay to this site. This is a former site of the KW camera and F1 camera. And in fact, they removed the cameras several weeks ago due to the fountains. They left the tripods. Here are the tripods for the KW and F1 cameras. I'm not sure which is which there. But they are also slated for removal soon. So that's sad news to know that those cameras are not going to be put back in the same place exactly. But I guess when there's this much stuff falling down and no prospect of it ending, you really got to change your plan, right? And what can you do? And then we have this fantastic image by Mike Zoller, watching an Anuenue, a rainbow stretching across a crater during episode 21 here. So yeah, you can see how long this flow is here along this northern wall. They said it was over 1 kilometer long, over 1/2 mile long. There was also another branch of this flow that came off towards the center of the crater, more towards the south, but the longest one was along the northern edge here. So this looks like it was in the evening, right before the fountains shut off. So there is an outgassing plume blowing southwest, rising vertically, being caught in an inversion here and blowing offshore towards Kau there. Here's looks like the overlook right to the side of Volcano House. A bunch of visitors looking at the eruption from there. And then there's a giant gas cloud as well, photographs by Matt Patrick here. So great viewing for everyone. The wind blowing everything away, so no VOG to worry about, no tephra fallout to worry about. Passing showers occasionally, but still plenty to see. And you can see fountains pretty high, dropping a lot of tephra here off to the side during those peaks of fountaining here. They note the height from the crater floor to the top of the cliff behind the fountain. And that height there is about 540 feet. So you can see that the fountains were above that. That's that 650 feet that they're reaching at the peak. So just before the end here at sunset, there's actually no, this looks like it's a sunset view here. You're not quite catching this northern flow here, but you are catching this central zone and the beginning of this flow going towards the center and the south here. And those are the images we have from the USGS. And yeah, this one I think is a great candidate for a screensaver or desktop background here. You guys can go find it online, USGS today. And so now we'll turn to our time lapses as our last main segment here. So we have the nighttime views for the last week here. You just saw that flash of the eruption come through, but I'll play it again from a week ago. Both events glowing. The north event a little more intermittently, then a little bit brighter coming up until the eruption itself. And they've both been glowing since as well. Maybe intermittently more so at first, but you can see they're both still quite active there. So looking at just episode 21, here is the lava flows leaking out that first little ooze, the fountains themselves. Fountains shut off. The lava is still moving under its own weight here, continuing almost like a slurry, still moving there until it finally hardens and solidifies. So there it is once again, those first little pistonings, overflows, that burst of the fountain lasting 8 hours, and everything cooling off again. So pretty fast in these views of the time lapse. I thought we could also see, so here's our traditional views of the V1 camera and time lapse. The whole eruption kind of zoomed out. The fountain, there's that flow still moving after the fountain shut off, the glow still coming in here. Yeah, so I'll play it one more time. It goes kind of fast here. The pistoning spatter. And that's the V1. We'll show you guys a different view of the V1 and V2 here in a minute, but first I'll just show you this, what we normally show you guys. And so just for comparison about how much we miss when we play things this fast sometimes. But here's the V2. Similarly, that first pistoning effect, the fountains, high fountains flash by quick, it shuts off, then everything goes dark by the end of that night. Stuff still moving a little bit there. In the foreground too, some overturning. But that is that whole V2 sequence there. So what I'll show you guys now is a time lapse of the actual live stream itself. So this is going to go a little bit longer. We can see a little bit more of this sequence of the V2 camera, the fountain rising with a small fountain, and then the pressure builds. We can start seeing it's starting to fall back away from the camera here and causing this dust cloud. It's taller and taller and taller. It's reached the crater rim. Now we see this shower of black tephra falling down, and you see it inclined, fan-shaped. This V there. Look at all the dark material falling out, generating a dust cloud as it hits that back wall there. And then the fountains diminish, spurting up again once, twice. Here's a third time. There's a fourth time. There's a fifth time. That's that kind of episodic cycling. Sixth time. And from this angle, a V2 camera gets obscured by the weather coming in until the fountain shut off, and things shut off there at the end. So that's the V2, still moving here at the end. Now let's go to the V1. The V1 camera, similar view from the very beginning of that cycle of upwelling. Fountains are small. It's going to start spilling over. You see it wash out down in here. And then the pressure builds, or the gas is accumulating and recirculating, starting to prime itself. There it goes, starting shooting out. Start off by seeing this V-shaped fountain right there. Then it fixes itself. Here's our fan. Look at that beautiful fan-shaped fountain with fallout visible on both sides, all that dark tephra. Look at this massive dust cloud where all the stuff is falling against the crater wall over here. And then here comes our cycles of higher and lower fountains. Focusing in this first pass, just in the fountains and this cone area itself, you see lava is pouring out in pulses down this chute, but also through the main channels, all through here. And this lower pulsing fountain continues for quite a while compared to the initial higher fountains with a tephra fallout. So as this keeps going, you see how fluid all this motion looks through the channels here. You see these bits of lava sticking through. These are probably parts of that wall of the levee itself there. And then here at the end, eruption. They zoomed in here as the fountain got smaller, shut off, and that rock is still slightly moving there in the background, even 2 days later here. So really fascinating there. And when we pull it back to this middle part again, the V1 view, you really can see how fluid lava is flowing across here and covering these areas. And I really think there is that V-shaped fountain again, the fan of it. Look at all that dust over there. It's really, really striking to me. I haven't quite caught this angle. And so it seems like, this is away from the camera. We talked about the trade winds blowing all this stuff off in that direction. That's certainly helpful. When I saw that V-shaped fountain in there as well, that leads me to believe that there was some kind of blockage in there as well. And so not only do I think the wind was blowing that stuff away, but likely there was something in the conduit. Maybe it was inclined, so that it was kind of directed at an angle also, something like that. Things we've heard about at Kīlauea Iki and Mauna as well before in their high fountaining phases. So maybe that combined with that higher burst of pressure with the higher fountains gave us that really spectacular set of views there. So, all right, there's the end of that V1 sequence, V2 sequence. And, well, maybe I'll play here from V1. This is coming till last night. Well, there is last night, and there you can start to see some spatter on a wall of this pit glowing a little bit there, right there. So coming back up already, even though it hasn't been so long. So just one last camera for us to look at. That's going to be the B1 camera. And this is that one that's left from the east side with this wide angle view. This is one of our few cameras that can see the whole caldera still. So it's become important now that we've lost the KW and the F1 cameras as well. So this is the one that really we can keep track of what's happening everywhere. So for this pass, we're going to do the last week from about the 10th, and just see that full sequence. There is a glow of the vents off in the far distance to the southwest. We can see there is that flow, the Mother's Day flow. Looks like a little bit of overturning happening there the day afterwards, but since then, you can see it's been pretty quiet. We haven't had any further ooze-up flows. There was one in there at the very beginning. I didn't point it out quite so quickly. Let's see if I can show it to you more zoomed in here. Okay, there comes the edge of the flow right there. You see the ground change. So that was a spot right there where that ooze-up flow happens. Just one little pad and then nothing else for the rest of the week. So similar to what we saw the previous week. So let's go back to looking at this from episode 20. So now we're back on the 5th. So here comes episode 20. It's going to put out a flow that comes more in this direction. There it goes. Episode 20 flow. It had an ooze up itself the day after. And then we have dark and quiet. Since then, everywhere across the crater floor, except at the vents, where you keep seeing the glow every single night there. We've had some periods between episodes we have not seen the glow all the time. So interesting to see that it's so persistent. Then our Mother's Day flow, our little ooze up, a little bit of overturning over here. And that's really what we see, apart from the glow is still going on there. So to get another view of this is what else we like to do here is to take just one view, one image from around noon each day. This is the last week. And just compare what those images look like, looking at it very fast. So we see our vent change here. You can see this flow up here and change over here. If you look, you can see this little ooze up flow more easily over the last week right there. But what I also want to show you guys is this whole uplift of the crater floor. And so we really like to look at what is being injected and lifting as a whole. And if you look in areas like in here, it looks like this zone here is not moving, but this whole band right here is moving upwards. So there is injection happening all the way to here. I see some happening over here too. Back in there, you see it happening. And everything on this side of it, injecting. Some other areas, maybe you can see more clearly too. No, it's a little flashy, but look, it looks like right here, this little pad, you can see wiggling up and down, and this one you don't. Interesting, because almost like an inflation of the flows, but for the whole crater floor on the eastern side here. Here's the remains of those September 2023 cones. You can see lava flows rising around them. And if you look closely, this cone itself is actually bobbing up, this cone rising too. It looks like on this side, this one is not, but there's a little piece of one right in here that is. So depending on which chunk of tephra is getting caught by this lava injecting and moving up, it's either rising or it's getting buried over here in this sector. And kind of look further back. Look back in here, this black stripe in here with the white around it. You can see that's wiggling too. This is just the last week, right? So since episode 20 ended, we're seeing injection in the crater floor before episode 21 and an ooze up flow right afterwards. So this is still happening, and it seems to be happening more consistently with each episode now. and it's happening to a greater extent. We were not seeing this so often on a B1 camera before. We're seeing it on a B2, which melted. It used to be over here. And we're seeing this happening more so in this zone of this uplift of the crater floor, which makes sense because that deepest inner pit is more like over there. And so all this stuff that's on a down drop block is shallower, but apparently now it's deep enough that we're having continual uplift of that entire segment as well. So that's really fascinating for me to see, and hopefully you guys can see that. Some areas look like they're rising even more than others. Right in there looks like it's going pretty fast. So really fascinating there. And that's really what we can share from the webcams this week. So there's really one last thing to do that relates to this, the Volcano Watch this week. And it's titled, What Lurks Beneath Learning from Lava Ooze Outs. So as we've been discussing, these ooze outs have been happening for a while. And to kind of cut to the chase here, they've been documenting these for a while. Here is a map of one with thermal. Here is a sample that they took after episode, before the onset of episode 12 on March 4th. And what you're noting here is that each light-colored blotch is a cluster of minerals that has a diameter of less than 1 millimeter or 0.03 inches. And while we've normally seen lots of olivines in our lava flows, especially our fresher ones, they note that in these lavas that have had more time to cool, you see more white plagioclase and dark green or brown pyroxene. So the ooze out lavas collected are dominated by clots of plagioclase and pyroxene with minor amounts of small olivine crystals. Right? And by small, they're saying here less than 0.5 millimeter, 0.02 inches. They also contain larger olivine crystals that have been recycled from previous eruptions. So it turns out that they actually have had undergrad students at University of Hawaii at Hilo examining the original samples of, for example, January to March 2023 and June 2023 eruptions. Right, both of those put lava into the pit. And those olivines that were erupted during those eruptions are some of those eruptions that have been recycled. They were actually erupted, ended up in the lake, and then got oozed out again afterwards. So we just have a hint exactly right now of we don't know how many and what the population distribution is as far as how many of these olivines from how many different eruptions. How, for example, how deep is the mixing happening? Are we seeing anything back from 2021? Or are we only seeing 2023? It'd be kind of a cool thing to know. We don't have that quite yet, but you can see that they're actually getting at this by putting this together. And so this is confirmation that when we hear that 2023 lavas are coming out, that we are having that big molten interior of that pancake stack or what have you, right? It's almost like a giant waterbed now of some kind. I don't know exactly, but the whole thing is swelling up there, injecting from below and oozing out the stuff that's been sitting and cooling in there and growing other crystals in the meantime. And that's why it comes out so spiny and slow and in that kind of ooze out characteristic fashion. So, all right, let's stop it there. We're at our time. We'll turn up to Dane if you have any questions lined up for us, and discussion we can have.
Yeah, first one to just shout out some more donations that came through, starting with a $20 donation from Norm. No comment on that one. Appreciate the support. We had Gary B., a longtime supporter, come on to the HVERI.org/donate and dropped a $52 donation. And then Catherine P. as well with a $26 donation. So appreciate all the continued support there. A lot of longtime viewers coming in today. So we did have a couple questions here for you. So Falcon asks, what is the base of the measurement for the fountaining? Top of vent or base of vents? Thanks. Just trying to figure out what they're measuring.
Yeah, that's a good question. I feel like it's the base of the vents, the base of the actual fountain itself, right? So, which is to say, it's higher than the crater floor, but it's lower than the top of the cone, right? So like in these images in here, somewhere down, you can't really see behind here, but I'd put the base of somewhere in there, and you're measuring how high it is from there, right? So this is obviously higher than down here, but it's lower than up here. So that can change, obviously, right? So it's, you know, that's a really tricky thing. We're trying to draw a cross section through here. What does it actually look like? And so you're looking for just something that looks reasonable, right? The opening sometimes can change exactly how high or low it is, or exactly where it is, or how wide. And so I think it's a little bit subjective too, but
Right.
we
As long as
have
you're
seen
consistent, you know, the same person goes to the same spot and shoots the same way every time, the numbers mean something. Even if you don't know exactly where they're looking, if they're jumping around and changing stuff all the time, then they mean less.
Yeah, so I think that's part of why they're going to this site as close as they can see with the laser rangefinder. Because from that angle, you can look, and what's the lowest spot you can see the fountain, what's the highest spot you can see the fountain,
right?
And then you can get it from there, right? That's why they're
Yeah, makes sense to me. All right, so we have one last question here from Hotel Papa. It says the last 3 inflation events showed small deflation signals around 1 day after the end of fountaining episode that disturb the normal diurnal wiggles. Sorry. Any explanation for that?
Yeah, that's a great observation. I'm not sure that I have an explanation. We can discuss a little bit here. Let's see if I can pull this up so everyone else can see what Hotel Papa is talking about. Let's come back up to the tilt graph here. Is this one going to do? This is a little scrunch. Let's go to the last month one.
Right.
Let's see here. Yeah.
Zoom in a little.
So, yeah. The last 3, right? So, okay. So we normally see, let's go back to the one before that. We normally see these diurnal signals. This is this wiggle up now he's talking about. He or she, Hotel Papa. There they go. Right? That's that normal variation we're seeing day to day. And what they're saying is there's a little extra something going on here, a little extra something going on, and a little extra something going on here. And what's going on with that? And yeah, that's a great observation. I'm not sure that I know what's going on with that. I think you could come up with any speculation as easily as I could, right? For something happening with movement of gas or lava within that pit. So I'll say this: we've seen background deflation inflation events at the summit of Kīlauea for a long time. We've not been seeing them so much now because we have this much larger signal dominating everything going on here. But this reminds me a little bit of a deflation inflation signal, really kind of zoomed in, right? And that's when we saw it in the past, the explanation given was that in some narrow conduit, when you're trying to move your lava around, your magma around, you have to sometimes drain some cooler magma and then replace it with a fresh stuff from below, right? So if we go on this general principle, and this is maybe opening a can of worms here, but in the Volcano Watch, they discuss how they want to compare some of those recycled olivines to what they see at Kīlauea Iki, because Kīlauea Iki had fountains that had to erupt through a lava lake, right? And that adds this complication that in between the fountains, the lava is trying to go back in the ground. It's draining from the lake back into the vent as well. That's not something we really had at Pu'u or Mauna Ulu so much. So if you're adding all this lava, we're now saying is connected under the crust of this eastern segment that has ooze-up flows and all those crystals. If lava is injecting into there so easily that we're seeing the crust rise up all the time between all the episodes, that's not part of the system. Your pressure drops following your episode. What's to stop lava in that area from actually draining back into your vent and causing a deflation inflation event? So that's my speculation there. I don't know exactly what's going on, but the fact that you have this extra body of lava, and if we're going to start comparing to Kīlauea Iki, and we had erupt through a lava lake, and that adds this drain back of the lake into the vent, we're erupting not necessarily through a lake because the thing is crusted over, but we have this massive volume over to the side. And let me pull up the Volcano Watch one more time here. They note that since the collapse, lava now reaches more than 1,400 feet deep, 425 meters in there. So for comparison, the Empire State Building is 1,250 feet tall. So more than Empire State of depth of lava in the pit in there that we have to mobilize. And yeah, I expect that a lot of it is cooled, and so there's probably some solid hardened bits in there or some really gooey stuff that's not as mobile. But somewhere you must have these pockets or channels or areas that have this more fluid stuff being injected that is more gas rich, is more mobile, is able to move in there and pop up the crust. And could that flow back? That's where I would start examining, trying to untangle this problem here without really knowing what the answer is. So maybe that a little bit further of a tangent, but that was a good question.
Yeah. So yeah, I was just looking at the new V3 cam, which is something that's out. So
well, yeah, you got a link that we can flash it up
yeah,
here real
just
quick.
put it in the Telegram for you. Here, sorry, there you go. Got an interesting view. Thank you, Yvonne, for pointing that one out.
Yeah, awesome. There we have the V3 online. Looks a little similar to the S1 camera. More that southern view, but maybe it's slightly further around, so it looks more at the
right. That's what I think. It's more further around
the
on the
south vent.
side.
Yeah.
We didn't have a good camera to look at the south. Like it was always obstructed almost by whatever the north was doing.
Right. Yeah, it's gonna take more cameras now that the area of impact is widening across the whole caldera floor. There, there's that little corner in the southwest that you can't really see that well, and it is a pan tilt zoom. It says here, so this may not be the only view we get. We'll probably see it zoomed out at some point and see the context a little bit more easily too. Right. Yeah, thanks for that. There's some breaking news on the webcam there.
All right, I think that does it for me. Thank you,
All
Phil.
right. Yeah, thank you guys. Appreciate Lou on the back end. Thanks for leading discussion, Dane, and thanks to our ASL interpreters, Carrie and Dano, as always, and to all of our community out there participating, listening to us, and checking in. So, all right, until next week, regular time, 5 p.m. Hawaiian time on Thursdays, unless something unusual to the pattern happens before then, we'll be back at that time. We expect to have another episode this weekend. Maybe it'll drag into next week. In either case, we'll recap that a week from today, unless something really unusual happens that's going to cause alerts that we really want to share with people ahead of time. So from our nonprofit Hawaiian Volcano Education Resilience Institute, or HVERI, for Lou Otori on the back end, Dane DuPont, I'm Philip Ong. Aloha, everybody. Till next week.